Weekly consideration portion 29 Ahare. 128.8.5 semicolon 76 semicolon 1 new 10. Slow and steady, wild dreams become routine. Ahare towards a tender child. Holy Week, Holy Thursday, Bon Friday, Pesach, Easter, Domingo, Pentecost. Greetings, my holy kinfolk. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, nir, jai janendra, satnam, nihao, buenos dias, hetsche, konnichiwa, sabadikra, salam wa, esh, agape, akwaba, welcome, what up, though? The soleil shines like warming spring, bright blue, green, white, and yellow walls, brown roofs, and rectangular windows. Cats sprawl across the daylight landscape, searching through the cigarette butts for nourishment. A child wails, mild, and a parent hushes gently, repeatedly. Young legs stretch with spring dances, shadows sit past the midday, and the green grass stays very short. Winds, 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 continually filling and emptying. Migrations amidst the hint of buds upon the tree branches, swaying with smiles. The travelers continue too, by the same determination of the winds around Quince. This is the weekly consideration for portion 29 Ahare within our yearly cycle of studying Tobadi Gogadao. Tobadi Gogadao, Torah, Bhagavad Gita, Digadakaya, Dhammapada, Gospels, Quran, Tao Te Ching. This includes verses 153 a 171 within the Kitab Yaqdas of Baha'i tradition, the nueve of a 10-week series of a full recitation of the Kitab Yaqdas. And in actuality, there is a hiatus this week within our yearly sequence. Due to a traditional scheduling protocol during this part of the year, this portion of the 29 Ahare weekly consideration is shared in advance for the next proceeding week. The weekly consideration is slow and steady, wild dreams become true. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah wabham. Dao ka dao fe chong dao min ka min fe chong min ja. Deus nos te kies in cele santa fakito nomentum. Vaheguru sanam. Baruch ata Elohim Eloheinu melech haolam asher kasan b'mitzvotav v'tzivon l'sok b'divai Torah. Amen. Kyrie eleison. Sivo mastu savajikatehem. Sabe seta b'vonta sukitata. Fagabiem. Akwaba upendo namani. Fakiri in islami. Chinta da penamia. Lebovimir. Womanjaka. Umbuto shabana. Fakithka. Session. Como se nida. Domo arigato. Pelama yelo wakan toko. Toko doko shingun. Go megan. God, we thank you for all that you bless us. Ata Jami Afalami, Madom, Ahom, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti, Amen. From the Torah, Vaikra 16:29-30. And all this shall be as an eternal statute for you. In the 7th month, on the 10th of the month, you shall afflict yourselves, and you shall not do any work, neither the native nor the stranger who dwells amongst you. For on this day Elohim shall effect atonement for you to cleanse you. Before Elohim you shall be cleansed from all your sins. One Ahava V'Shalom. From the Chandogya Upanishads, Kanda 4:15-5. Now whether or not they perform the funeral rites for such person, he goes to light, from light to day, from day to bright half of the moon, from the bright half of the moon to the 6 months during which the sun goes to the north. From these months to the year, from the year to the sun to the moon, from the moon to the lighting, there a being who is not a human being meets him and leads him to Brahman. This is the path of the angels, Devayana, the path leading to Brahman. Those who travel by it do not return to the world of humanity, yea, they do not return. One Anand Shanti. From the Bhagavad Gita, the Visvarupa Darshana Yogehe, 11:52 a 54. Sri Krishna says, "It is very hard to see the form of mind which you have seen. Even the angels are ever eager to see this form, neither by the devas, nor by penances, nor by giving alms, nor yet by offering. Am I able to be seen in the form in which you have now beheld me? Behold, by devotion to me alone may I be known in this form, O Arjuna. Realized truly and entered into, O dreaded prince." From the Tao Te Ching. Pause for a second. Okay. From the Tao Te Ching, chapter 31, 4 a 16, and from chapter 31, 6 a 14. From chapter 31. The place where the troops camp, thistles and thorns grow. Following the great army, there must be an auspicious year. A benevolent commander achieves result, then stops, and does not dare to reach for domination. Achieves result but does not brag. Achieves result but does not flaunt. Achieves result but is not arrogant. Achieves result but only out of necessity. Achieves result but does not dominate. Things become strong and then get old. This is called contrary to the Tao. Chapter 31. The military is a tool of misfortune, not the tool of honorable gentlemen. When utilizing it out of necessity, calm detachment should be above all, victorious but without glory. Those who glorify are delighting in the killing. Those who delight in the killing cannot achieve their ambition upon the world. From Mencius, chapter 9, subchapter 2, verse 4. The prince said again to Zan Yu, "Hitherto I have not given myself to the pursuit of learning, but I have found my pleasure in horsemanship and sword exercise, and now I don't come upon to the wishes of my aged relatives and the officers, and I am afraid I may not be able to discharge my duty in the great business that I have entered on. Do you again consult Mencius for me." On this, Zan Yu went again to Cao and consulted Mencius. Mencius said, "It is so, but he may not seek a remedy in others, but only in himself." Confucius says, when a prince dies, his successor entrusts the administration to the prime minister. He sips the congee. His face is of a deep black. He approaches the place of grieving and weeps. Of all the officers and inferior ministers, there is not one who will presume not to join in lamentation. He's setting them this example. What the superior loves, his inferior will be bound to love exceedingly. The relationship between superiors and inferiors is like that between the wind and the grass. The grass must bend when the wind blows upon it, but the business depends on the prince. One ayah hepping. The Maha Sudassana Sutta 17, chapter 2, verse 4.1 from the Digha Nikaya. Then anon the great King of Glory went out from the chamber of the great complex and entered the golden chamber and sat himself down on the silver couch. And he let his mind pervade one quarter of the world with thoughts of love, and so the second quarter, and so the third, and so the fourth. And thus the whole wide world, above, below, around, and everywhere did he continue to pervade with heart of love, distant reaching, grown great and beyond measure, free from the least trace of anger or ill will. Once Metta Samadhi. From the Dhammapada, the Appamada Vaja dos 24-27. Ever grows the glory of him who is energetic, mindful, and pure in conduct, discerning and self-controlled, righteous and heedful. By effort and heedfulness, discipline and self-mastery, let the wise one make for himself an island which no flood can overwhelm. The foolish and ignorant indulge in heedlessness, but the wise one keeps his heedfulness as his best treasure. Do not give way to heedlessness. Do not give way to heedlessness. Do not indulge in sensual pleasures. Only the heedful and meditative attain great happiness. 1. Metta Samadhi. For the Gospels, Luke 14:7-11. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person further distinguished than you may have been entitled. If so, the host will invite you, If so, the host who invited you, both of you, will come and say to you, "Give this person your seat." Then humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you'll be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. 1 Amr Baks. From the Quran, Surah As-Saba 34-37 and Surah Al-Fatir 35-18. It is not your wealth nor your sons that will bring you near to us in degree, but only those who believe and work righteousness. These are the ones for whom there is a multiplied reward for their deeds, while secure they reside in the dwellings on high. Nor can a bearer of burdens bear another's burden. If one heavily laden should call another to bear his load, not the least portion of it can be carried by the other, even though he be nearly related. Thou canst but admonish such as fear their Lord unseen and establish regular prayer, and whoever purifies himself so does so for the benefit of his own soul. And the destination of all is to Allah. 1 Al-Hab Wasalam. Verses Kitabi Akdas, verses 7:53-7:54. Should anyone wax angry with you, respond to him with gentleness, and should anyone upbraid you, forbear to upbraid him in return. But leave him to himself and put your trust in God. the omnipotent avenger, the Lord of might and justice. You have been prohibited from making utilization of pulpits. Whoso wisheth to recite you unto the verses of his master, let him sit on a chair placed upon a dais, that he may make mention of God his master and master of the matter of mind. It is pleasing to God that ye should seat yourselves on chairs and benches as a mark of honor for the love for the love that you bear for God and for the manifestation of God's glorious and resplendent cause. Eshwaso. Alhamdulillah, Baruch Hashem, Jayom, Hallelujah, Mado, Aho, Allahu Akbar, Namaste, Om She. Same old new day. By the way, weekly consideration also happens to be a haiku. Whatever. I am near completion of a book that I am sharing with loved ones and soliciting a contribution to the cause accordingly. The book contains poetry, prose, photographs, immigration communiques, all written and completed since I arrived here in Denmark, as well as Earth Civilization educational materials and additional materials. For those inclined for additional information, you can hit me up. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mir, zajin, ayos, tejak, lis, Sainara, Medesamadi, Salangwa, Pyongwa, Eshwasol, Agape Irini, Asempirina, Asmuje, Kelly Ofred. One love and peace, happiness, and liberation. That's the basic gist for this joint. There needs to be some editing and formatting of the written material amidst the presentation of it to our general audience on the internet at the moment. So I'm just speaking extemporaneously and half asleep now, to be honest, as well. Low energy and rest within recent days. I'm saying concluding blessing from doing the readings and study. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Ar-Rahman Rahim, Allah Abha, Dauka Dao Fei Chong Dao Minka Ming Fei Chong Ming Ja, Deus nos tekias in Chela Santo Fakito Namatum, Vahegu Salam, Baruch Chata Elohim, Elohim Melechalam, Ashekasana Bamizotavi Tzivon Sukur Vaitor, Amen. Kyrie eleison, Siva Master, Subject the Hay, Sabe Sata, Bavantus Kitata, Vagabiem. Aquaba, upendo na mani, fakiri in Islami, Chita dan per me, libav me, Umjagam. Ubutu Shabana, Fakithga. Shishin, Kabosinira, Domo Arigato. Put my yellow walk and talk, a talk with ocean good, go with the God. God, we thank you for all your blessings. Other Jimmy of the me, widow, the home, Shanti, 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 Amen. So there are updates regarding my situation. I can say I'm in sound home at the moment. Still continuing. There's a second interview scheduled with Danish Immigration Services, which is actually a considerably favorable indication, though it's still not out of the woods yet. Meanwhile, consideration about transferring additionally. For the moment, because pretty much all the formal offices are closed for the observance of Easter this weekend, there's less anticipation of being solicited to move to another facility within the next few weeks, even to the next week when the next interview is scheduled. That being said, I'm reaching out to lawyers at the moment, immigration lawyers, the immigration community here in Denmark, particularly regarding the ventures of establishing the Vedesland Kulturhus in the vicinity of Frederikshavn here in Denmark. Premised on mixed heritage world citizenship. Considering that the Danish immigrant community may be increasingly readily amenable, interested, motivated, encouraged to talk about this, to support it, and particularly to provide and invest in it, to provide support, contributions, and to invest within this initiative, to secure a house. Maintaining the title of the house and additional whatever with that, but allowing the house to be utilized for residence for myself and my wife in house. Also to provide the outreach, the service program with Vedesland Kulturhus, song stories, food, education, as well as the scriptural reasoning consultations and instruction. And then also the Secretariat for our global mixed heritage diaspora. Additional elements are along those lines. Actually, again, I mentioned going to the Danish immigrant community, leadership along those lines. Also emphasizing in that respect the initiative that's recently suggested about establishing a specific program for refugees and immigrants arriving in Denmark, for an educational program providing guidance materials concerning the experience in being world citizens. As particularly as a methodology of becoming increasingly acculturated and copacetic mutually here within Danish society. So that's one of the tangible joints that's involved with what we're sharing. I work on the book, Refugee Champion. The content is pretty much already there. It's just a matter of basically compiling it somewhat a little bit in terms of like formatting it additionally, and then printing it and distributing it. So at this moment, given what the response is concerning investment in the project and in the Mixed Heritage World Citizen Press venture, the intention is to share it organically at this moment, rather than promoting it or soliciting people to make specific contributions for this. So again, I'm focusing on immigrant community. I've reached out to a lawyer, actually a number of legal counsel here in Denmark concerning my case, but also in terms of building conversation for the larger, longer-term projects that we are involved in at this moment. The Kulturhus, but also establishing and cultivating the infrastructure within our mixed heritage diaspora. And along those lines, also another suggestion to share, which is to reach out to humanitarian agencies like Caritas Internationalis, like Civa International, and advocate these kinfolk to actually just sit down and talk with us and learn about what's happening with mixed people, why it's an important thing, but also to recognize it as a humanitarian issue, particularly because of the compounded effects when affliction is experienced. Note specifically at the moment, Ukraine. And so the specific consideration at the moment is soliciting a joint project, which is to complete a publication, an independent established publication, basically displaying the mixed heritage experience in the diaspora, providing basically like a report on this. So it's like what is it called? Actually, I have those right here. The state of the mixed heritage diaspora. So the idea is this. First, coordinating with mixed groups, saying if there's an interest in this to back this and get ready for it. But with that, establish, then going to the humanitarian organizations that I mentioned before, and negotiating, encouraging a memorandum of understanding, a memorandum of agreement, saying that all parties involved have the intention of completing this report. And then with that, approaching agencies like the United Nations, the whole system, UNESCO, and additionally, as well as additional international civic agencies to secure funding, grant for completing this publication, to provide people with some type of compensation for doing the work, to put food on the table for people who do this, including yours truly. And then again, with the memorandum of understanding from the humanitarian organizations, going to these agencies to secure funding to complete the publication, and then to do it. And particularly recognizing this as a humanitarian crisis. That's the subheading for this tentative report, acknowledging a humanitarian crisis beyond borders and boxes. So that's the idea. Building what we've already done with the global census for mixed heritage diaspora. Doing something increasingly formal, particularly as a public information tool. I'm avoiding the term resource effectively, but that's the idea. And then utilizing that as a way of cultivating further discussion here in Denmark in our international community, and that involving workshops, and additionally that lead further towards. There's tremendous benefit in many different ways, multifaceted benefits, but. In our estimation for ourselves, how we can utilize it is utilizing it as an introduction to the conversation about mixed heritage world citizenship, and also that being again the premise for the Kulturhus. So there's that, the humanitarian issue. What else? I also find a number of agencies that specifically deal with torture and refugees and the experience of torture. And so I reached out to a number today about sharing information about my case, less so as a matter of like advocacy for myself personally, but just to provide people with an FYI. Because when I talk with a lot of experts who deal with immigration and the different humanitarian and human rights issues that are going around the earth, there's seeming obliviousness about what specifically happens to me, the atrocities, the torture, and additionally that I experience at the hands or by the hands of the United States and medical science. So that means that there's some information that's beneficial for professionals who are supposed to know about this to know about this. And so that's the consideration. I reach out to a number of agencies that specifically focus on this experience of torture and refugees. So there's that. There's ideas too. Like, for example, this one, leadership by commitment. I'm just throwing this one out here. Leadership by commitment. So one of the things that's expressed in our international community, particularly with institutions that are closely aligned with the United Nations, is this notion of the millennium quote unquote development goals. So there's a lot of concerns about just how that's framed and communicated, but leaving that for the moment. It's also antiquated. Like, the United Nations is behind the curve when it comes to pluralism, multiculturalism, international citizenship, and additionally, because it's very much entrenched in status quo. And so the things that were very avant-garde, still, the United Nations I don't think was ever avant-garde, because it's very difficult for it to be so. It being the construction of, or the construct of conventional authority. But as much as it may have been perceived as such 80 years ago when it's founded, nearly that much, 76 years, today it's very much behind the curve, and it's actually it's being further obstructive of like genuine and enduring, continuing evolution of the human psyche and the geopolitical cooperation that results from such. So that being said, the train of thought is awaiting. The United Nations is behind the curve. There needs to be some catch up. And leadership by commitment. So the Millennium Development Goals. So, like I said, the methodology, the approach, the intentionality, the objectives are off. And here's like, and there's no getting back on track. Like the way of doing things itself is off. So there's little expectation of it happening. But here's a recommendation, and so this is what it is. Rather than like the United Nations communicating what the intentions are of these Millennium Development Goals, which the millennium occurred in the Gregorian calendar 20 years ago, and whatever objectives were intended at around that point or whatever, the fact that it's still being referenced as a futuristic kind of like a objective for the collective of humanity, that is rather biased, off balance, myopic, and eventually futile as well. But all right, here's a recommendation solution. Rather than institutions, whether it's the United Nations, whether it's corporations, whether it's banks, whether it's individual nations or whatever, let that go in terms of expectations about commitments and everything else. Because we already know, to be honest, excuse the English, but it's bullshit. We all know that. And I can lift my head and would do whatever else cats want to hear about that, but it's bullshit. Things get done with it. There's a lot of hype that gets circulated around it that actually employs people and puts food on the table for many people. But in actuality, in terms of actually getting things done, it's bullshit. And one of the reasons why is because there's zero accountability. Effectively, I mean, there's extremely little accountability. There's a lot of passing the buck around, but in the nature of institutions, those who make policies one year get placed elsewhere. So it's not that. So the people who arrive say, "Oh, I didn't make the policy. I'm just here inheriting the da 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 da." So it goes around and around. Here's the consideration: individual commitment. So leadership by commitment, and by that it's this: when a person turns of age, when a man or a woman becomes of age, becomes an adult, then as part of that rite of passage in our international community, that adult articulates the commitments that adult is making in that person's generation. So, for example, like when it might be when that rite of passage occurs, whether it's graduating from high school, whether it's graduating from PhD program, whether that's enlisting in a civil service, military service, whatever. But whenever the adult that part is, the person is solicited to say, okay, here's what I pledge to do in this generation, to get accomplished in this generation. And then from that person, some examples, like there are a number of categories of like commitments. Like, for example, in the Millennium Development Goals can fit within these individual commitments. But the idea is, like, for example, like I commit towards like I have to be careful of this because I'm speaking hypothetically, but that's an illusion, so I have to be mindful of this. One commitment might be like the cleaning of rivers around the earth, like so that people can drink from it. Now that's a huge commitment. It's doable, but it's a huge commitment. But that's an example. What's another tangible one? Committing. To be honest, the commitments that I think about are the personal commitments, and that's part of the notion as well. The leadership by commitment. It's individual commitments that the person promised to do oneself, but then also collective commitments. Like I'm committed to this actually eventually happening within this generation, and that's the time frame of accountability. It's within this generation. Like I'm committed towards the collective of international community. Having some type of literacy or something to that effect. But anyways, you can already see me falling half asleep already. So my concentration is waning, and there's other things that I'm working on. So leadership by commitment. When a person becomes of age, a person commits individually as well as collectively to certain protocols, certain standards, and additionally. So whatever those things are covered within the Millennium Development Goals, that can be what the person individually commits to. Like, I commit to this happening within this generation. Within this generation, this is what we promise, what we pledge to happen. Now, for myself, like I said, I focus on individually. So I commit towards being vegan. I commit towards being chaste and having sex only in the bond of marriage. I commit towards not initiating violence towards anybody, particularly directly, specifically directly. So those are personal commitments. So anyways, when a person becomes an adult, when a man becomes a man, when a woman becomes a woman, that person makes those commitments. And then from that, and the person can add commitments during the course of one's life as one decides, but there's no going back from the commitments. Like once a person says a commitment, that's for this generation, that's for life. The person might be able to adjust it appropriately, and that's on the public record or whatever, but there's no backing out from those commitments. So that being said, it's from those commitments that a person is hired for a job, that a person is invited to go to a university or given admission to a university or graduate program. The person is hired for or elected to an office or selected for an office or conferred with responsibility, becomes or appointed CEO, gets promoted or whatever else, based upon the public commitments that person makes. And the accountability that exists within those commitments. So it's not a matter of like an institution saying, hey, we're going to do this, and then everybody in the institution goes someplace else, and then it's a completely different institution or institutional leadership. The person who becomes secretary general, whatever else, already has what they say are their personal commitments. And so people can make a decision of like, do we want somebody who's committed to that? Do we share those same priorities? And additionally, so right there, that's a person's politics, that's a person's religion, that's a person's social status and class and everything else are those commitments. But then again, like they said, there's also that accountability. So the communities, the society's politics can be decided based upon these commitments as well. But again, accountability, So anyways, that's the idea. Leadership by accountability. And this is not in the weekly consideration. I'm going off script with this joint, and that's atypical for this newfound scenario of doing the weekly considerations. I also mentioned at the beginning of this writing, because I actually do write these things, that this week is actually an off week. This weekly consideration is actually for next week, but because I've abstained from mentioning that before, I'm sharing it now in advance, so it's covering basically 2 weeks. There's reasons for that in terms of like just the schedule, how this is done, but that's just what it is without getting into too much detail and complication at the moment with that explanation. So the nature of commitments that people can make, again, they can be personal, ethical, discipline, and practices. It can be social justice oriented. It can address environmentalism. It can address ethnic, religious harmony, sexual activity, native land, and additionally. So those are just some topics. But like I said, everything that's covered within the Millennium Development Goals, the kind of anonymous type of joints. There are people who are specific authors of it, but again, much of those people are actually out of office or otherwise, but individual accountability, and again, people being hired of that. So if a person doesn't have any commitments, then that organization might say, yo, this cat's not committed to nothing. What do we want to use this cat for? What are they going to get for us? Or if the person has a huge laundry list of commitments, this cat is like, they occupy right now. Can they actually do the work that we need to be done? Have the flexibility and everything else to attend to what we got going on over here. So decisions, again, politicians, rather than saying what their policy is, what they're promising to do, this and the other, what have they been committed to for the past 20 years, and how have they worked towards that? We can see what that is. So, and again, it's not a matter of like what's commitment for the next year, or 4-year, 5-year plan. It's for this generation. Like when a person is becoming of age, of an adult, what am I making a pledge? What am I committed to my generation accomplishing in this lifetime? And then we'll see the track record. We'll see the benchmarks from that. So anyways, that's the consideration with leadership by commitment. And that's much of what's happening on this side. We've got the intense window. Maybe that's why I'm talking at this point. We got the intense window. It is Ramadan at the moment. It is Holy Week at the moment. Holy Thursday is approaching mañana, including obviously Good Friday and Easter afterwards. Pesach is beginning within a day, 2 days basically. And we have the Upasada per usual, and additional observances as well. So this is an intense period, and that's where things are at the moment. I'm trying to think. I did articulate before that I am married, and that I abstain from saying much of anything else beyond that at the moment until circumstances are proficiently copacetic. And I'll also be candid in terms of like describing my personal situation, like being here in Denmark. What I find happening is me being increasingly distant from my connections in the Western Hemisphere, specifically amidst the United States. And it's other than something that's intentional, that's natural, but it's also somewhat challenging because it's almost like perhaps a certain amount of out of sight, out of mind. But the implications of my organizing, my continued organizing. To be honest, I'm increasingly like delving into Denmark, and increasingly investing myself within relationships and cooperation with kinfolk who are situated and based here in Denmark, in Europe, and the Eastern Hemisphere, and the Earth. So it's interesting for myself at going on 50 years, 47 specifically, of having this kind of like significant, considerable like adjustment within life. So it's understandable, but it's still like another thing when one goes through it. So I wrote a book about it. Like to hear it, here you go. So that's that. I think that's much of what I share at the moment. I'm not intended to say anything at all off script, but there it is. So what else would it be if it wasn't an hour long or whatever? How about we at this 40 minutes? All right. Wow, I guess I'm all up on this too. I was reading, I guess is the reason why. So that's that. I think it's Black Cream, the South African hip hop reference. So the only thing left on the script, unless there's anything else, is Namaste, Assalamu Alaikum, Shalom, Mir, Jai Jinendra, Satnam, Zaijen, Adios, Che Chakthlis, Metta Samadhi, Salangwa Pyongwa, Eshwa Sol, Agape Ke Erini, Asempe Na Asamuje, Keligate Old Fred. One love and peace, happiness, and liberation.